this show for you. It's a live legal call-in talk show. And so we are here to answer any questions you have regarding personal injury, workers' compensation, Social Security, car accidents, or anything like that. But I'm not here alone. I am blessed to have a special guest with me today to answer other questions regarding other areas of law. And that is Michelle Perez. Michelle, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, Matt. Hi, listeners. My name is Michelle Perez. I'm an immigration attorney, and I work with Egan Immigration.
Yes, Michelle is an immigration attorney, so she'll be able to answer any questions regarding immigration. I think she's going to set up TikTok.
Yeah,
I started you a little too early. Sorry about that. So let me just talk a little bit about our firm, Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes, who sponsor this. We are a personal injury law firm. We're the oldest personal injury law firm in Tampa Bay. We started back in 1955, helping people after car accidents and other personal injury matters. And since then, we have handled solely personal injury cases. Guy Perenich started the firm. Bob Carroll jumped in. Jay Avril, Mark Perenich, Brian Caulfield, and myself, and Jacqueline Bryant all have led the firm since 1955 from one time or the other. And we are proud to fight for those who are injured. We are one of the voices of the injured. If you have questions regarding personal injury, tonight's the night to give us a call at 441-3000. Or you can also get on our YouTube channel too. We're going to be live on YouTube as well, and so you can watch us there as well. I always said I have a I have a face for radio, but unfortunately YouTube also shows the face as well. So, but we call this FLA Law on the radio because many years ago the firm had FLA Law on TV. It was a live legal call-in talk show, and we were able to answer so many questions, and we just wanted to give back to the community again by doing it on the radio. And so it does look like Michelle is all set up on TikTok. And so please, if you have any questions regarding immigration law, give us a call at 441-3000. Now, Michelle, we talk about immigration law, and you and I know what that means, but why don't you tell our listeners, the general things that you do as an immigration law attorney?
Yeah, sure. So there's two sides to immigration, right? There's the government side who wants to deport immigrants in this country. And then there's us, the defenders. So we are the immigration attorney defenders, and we help people stay in the country who may be here illegally or without documents. And we also help those that are outside the country that want to come in legally with some sort of visa or opportunity for employment. We help those to come into the country with legal status. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what we do.
Yeah, that's kind of like when we say personal injury. There's all kinds of other things that includes personal injury, but immigration's the same way.
Exactly.
Now, it was really cool because my son Jacob and I were at the Rays game on Sunday, I believe it was. Maybe it was Saturday. But this weekend, and they had a whole group of people swearing in as U.S. citizens. Yes. Right on the field, right before the game. It was really cool. And especially this week, since I knew you were going to be our guest.
Right.
So it was cool. And it had I think from 10 different countries. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that's the naturalization citizenship process?
Yes.
Can you tell our listeners what those people had to go through in order to be on the center field in Tropicana this past weekend to become U.S. citizens?
So for naturalization, aka obtaining your citizenship, you have to go through, first you have to be a lawful permanent resident. So normally people call that the green card holder. You have to be a green card holder for a certain amount of years. It's either 5 years or 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen spouse. You can do it within 3 years and show that you have a bona fide marriage with that U.S. citizen spouse. If you do it 5 years, then you would have to show that you are a person of good moral character and that you deserve and want to be a U.S. citizen. You want to be a citizen of this country. So it usually entails showing that you've been here for 5 years, that you understand the English language, that you can pass a simple civics test. And I say simple, but
I'm going to correct you on that because I looked at those questions. I wanted to test Jacob, my son, on some of those questions, but I didn't.
Don't test me because I have to constantly look them up because it changes depending on who's president, who's in Congress, who's in the Senate. And some of the responses I really don't know.
Some hard questions.
There's some hard questions. So you have to pass a civics test and you have to pass a writing and vocabulary test in order to get your citizenship. So they basically look at your background, see what you've been doing the last 5 years. Normally, if you've just been a good boy or girl, they allow you to get your citizenship. And of course, you have to pass the civics and the English and the vocabulary. They will grant you citizenship. And so once after that interview, if they grant you the citizenship, you go to what they call a ceremony. So one was on the baseball field.
Yeah, on the baseball field.
Yeah, so really that's cool. Awesome.
So how long of that process was it for them from the start all the way to this weekend at Tropicana?
Well, actually, citizenship applications are not taking very long.
Oh, okay.
Those are one of the applications that are going really fast in our immigration system. They must have hired a lot of citizenship naturalization officers. But we've had one that was adjudicated within 5 months, and they passed, they had their interview, and became a citizen all within 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that can happen really quick.
It could happen really quickly.
Well, great. Well, if anybody has questions regarding the citizenship process, give us a call. And also, I was finally able to get Facebook hooked up correctly. Oh, nice. And so we are live on Facebook on the firm's Facebook page at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes Injury Lawyers. So we are live. So we encourage you to tune in on Facebook as well. And if you don't really want to hear your voice on the radio, but you do have a question, please don't hesitate to put your question under the comments, and I have it right in front of me, and I'd be happy to address your question without you necessarily having to go on to the radio.
Yeah.
So
I actually have some questions coming up on my TikTok.
Oh, perfect.
I actually did TikTok live on Egan Immigration. We have quite a following, and I had one question here about a VAWA approval. We can do.
Yeah, why don't we talk about? Why don't you first talk about what VAWA is, right?
Yeah. So a VAWA self-petition is a way for an applicant who has been mistreated or abused by a specific immediate family member, which can be a U.S. citizen spouse, LPR meaning lawful permanent resident. Okay. I use those acronyms so much that I just spit them out sometimes.
Oh, goodness.
But U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident spouse, or even a U.S. citizen child over the age of 21. Or we also have U.S. citizen children or lawful permanent resident parents that mistreat or abuse their children who may be undocumented and under the age of 25. We also help those individuals seek what we call a VAWA self-petition. And that's basically just the person petitioning for themselves because their abuser may or may not petition for them. And sometimes what happens with the abuser is they hold that immigration status over their head. And so this is the VAWA allows the applicant to petition for themselves without having assistance from their immediate family member that might be mistreating or abusing them.
And VAWA, I know, stands for Violence Against Women's Act, but It's not just women. Though.
It's not. It's for men too. So it is women and men. We actually have a lot of men at my firm, a lot of male clients that have petitioned and have been approved for VAWA self-petitions.
Great. And if I understand correctly, there may be some hesitation because people think that their family member is going to get in trouble if they do that petition, or the police have to get involved.
Right.
Can you clear that up for those people that may be thinking that that's the case?
Yeah, definitely. So VAWA is submitted, I like to say, in secret almost, right? It's confidential for the protection of the victims, obviously. But it's submitted to a special service center that specially handles abuse victims, which include VAWA, U visa, T visa victims. So it's kept within, I would say, that facility, and they're regulated by the law that they cannot let outside offices know that that petition is pending within their building, I would say, or facility. So it is secret. They don't call the police to go arrest your abuser, spouse, child, or parent. Nothing real. It doesn't really affect them. It doesn't affect them at all. I had a few questions where it's like, well, it's my lawful permanent resident spouse and they want to get their naturalization, and now I'm saying that they've abused me. It doesn't go. That information doesn't transfer over to their citizenship application, so it doesn't affect their family member at all.
So it does give them an opportunity for some protection without risking other family members.
Right.
Kind of encourage them to take that step in order to do that application.
Right. Exactly.
Now we talk about violence, but it doesn't have to be physical violence either for a VAWA, right?
We're actually digging deeper into our the way that we view the abuse. A new one that I've recently researched, case law is always changing.
It's never dull. That's why you got to specialize in the area.
It's never dull. It's always changing. So there's a cultural identity abuse that I have been researching real intensely lately. And it's just making fun of your heritage, your culture, the way you dress, the way you speak, the way you eat. What kind of foods you eat. Like that is a form of abuse that is recognized.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, it is.
And also there's financial abuse, like they take their paycheck and such like that.
Financial abuse. There's emotional, obviously verbal abuse, psychological abuse, identity abuse. If you're a part of the LGBT community and they have mistreated you, or your, any LGBT friends or anything like that, talked harshly about that community, then that is a form of abuse as well. And that can be used for your VAWA petition as well.
Now, the VAWA's petitions, do you see a lot of those being filed? Is that one of the higher types of visas, or is
yes.
there? Okay.
I'm seeing a lot of. Well, we are doing a lot of VAWAs at Egan. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something that was necessarily known to a lot of immigration attorneys, or maybe they were afraid to jump into this because it's all about the client's story. So you have to be very descriptive about what happened to them, and it's all about credibility. So I think a lot of attorneys are afraid to touch that because it's a whole monster in itself.
Right. And it also, if I can put words into what you guys do, it's also taking the time to listen. Right. It's not just filling out forms. These are the paperwork that you have to do. It's having an attorney or a firm that's willing to listen to what's going on and deciding what steps that are necessary.
Right.
And I've known Michelle for a long time. Believe it or not, Michelle was our receptionist before she went to law school. So I've known Michelle for a very long time. And in high school. It was high school, wasn't it?
It was high school. I was your receptionist in high school.
So only like 2 years ago, right?
Yeah. 2 years.
Yes. No. So I know Michelle to be a very kind and empathetic person. And so immigration law is just perfect for her. Yes. Now, you're part of Egan Immigration. Yes. Can you tell our listeners what Egan Immigration is and that whole part and a little bit more about that firm?
Sure. Yeah. So Egan Immigration was founded by Lauren Egan in Washington, D.C. And we've been around for about, I think it's going on 9 years now. Uh-huh. And since Lauren started Egan Immigration, it has grown exponentially. We have about 8 attorneys in 5 different states around the country. Wow. Our primary office is in Virginia. But we only have a small staff there, mainly for mailings and filings and that kind of stuff. But we have paralegals and case specialists all around the world and all around our country.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
That is very, very neat that you can do it. And unlike us who are state board, and so I can only practice in the state of Florida, immigration law is different. You can practice throughout the country.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
Yeah, because it's federal.
It's federal.
Federal law that comes into play. And if we have some time, we'll talk about the state law that also impedes upon the federal law in some regards. But so you can help people not just throughout the country, but probably throughout the world, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
They call. We can definitely help them try to enter the United States with a lawful visa.
Why don't you tell our listeners why you got into it? I think I know the story.
Yeah, you know the story.
But why don't you tell a little story about why you do immigration law?
Oh, it's crazy. So when I was a receptionist, you guys were doing, obviously you guys do personal injury. And I was like, wow, this is a lot. Personal injury encompasses a lot. I knew I wanted to be an attorney when I started working for you guys. I just wasn't sure what type of attorney I wanted to be. So obviously I did my bachelor's, went to law school, and I said, I'm going to be a transactional business, wills and estates attorney. And that's what I'm going to be.
If you would have asked me, I would have said you never have been able to do that.
Yeah.
You're too personable for that.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with those lawyers who do that kind of area, but I could not do that.
Yeah. I was like, I'm just going to handle paper and just like write everything up and make sure the law is good. But it wasn't until I was almost forced into an immigration clinic at my law school that it really opened up my eyes to how many people really need our help, and how many people are going unrepresented, not knowing what their rights are. And then my parents are immigrants from Dominican Republic.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't really necessarily connected to until my mom's like, oh, can you help me with my citizenship now that you're an attorney? And I'm like, you're not a citizen. And so I've been helping my parents, get their citizenship in the process of, I became an attorney. So it kind of, it fed into like what I became passionate about, but also like my family, where my family came from and how important my family is to me. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. Yeah.
And I do know some of your family.
Yes, a lot of my family, actually.
And they're very sweet and they're very wonderful as well.
Yeah.
But when you're not practicing immigration law, I think you have at least one or two, I think two or three. Three little things that keep you busy. Why don't you tell our listeners what keeps you busy when you're not doing immigration law?
They can be extremely busy.
One big guy too.
Yeah, one big guy. He's the big kid. Yeah. My husband Richard. Yeah. So
I was going to let you say that. I wasn't going to say that, Richard.
No, he knows. He knows that he's my fourth kid, basically. Yeah. So I have a husband and 3 kids. My oldest is 7.
Wow.
I know. And my middle's 4, and my youngest is 1.
Wow. So they do keep you busy, but you're still able to help all kinds of people through the immigration process. So it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, you're originally from Tampa Bay, right?
I'm originally from Queens, New York.
Okay, Queens, New York. Okay, but you came down here when you were still young.
Yes, when I was a year before starting to work for you.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was 15, yeah.
And then you went to law school where? I
went to law school in Florida National University in Miami, Florida.
Okay. And then were you down there for a little while?
I was down there for probably 10, 15 years, I think.
So you started your practice down there?
Yeah. Well, I started working for a solo practitioner down there for the majority of I'm a very loyal employee. I was there for like 7 years. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was there for a long time.
And then we're glad you came back up here, too.
I did, yeah.
So
Miami's
I bet your family is very happy that you came up here, too.
Oh, my mom was ecstatic. Yeah.
Especially with the grandbabies.
Yes, yes.
So, no, that's very good. Well, if you have any questions regarding immigration law, Michelle is here until 6 o'clock. She's here to answer any questions that you have. Our number is 441-3000. But again, we're also on the firm's Facebook page at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes Injury Lawyers. But we're also on Egan Immigration TikTok. And
if you don't have Facebook, you're also on the firm's YouTube channel as well.
That is correct. We are also on the YouTube channel as well. So there's all kinds of ways to get to us with your questions. We are here for about another half hour to answer your questions. Again, I am Matthew Noyes. This is radio show sponsored by Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes, the oldest personal injury law firm in Tampa Bay. So I can answer questions regarding personal injury, Social Security, workers' comp, and other things. But Michelle, my guest, is here to answer questions regarding immigration law. But before we take the call, we were talking about the different visas, and we mentioned a T visa.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, the listeners, what a T visa is and when does that come into play?
Yeah. So a T visa is also a special visa for victims of trafficking. So it includes sex trafficking, human trafficking, labor trafficking, which is a big one that people don't know about. And
why don't you tell us about that? What's labor trafficking?
Labor trafficking is basically mistreatment from your employer. Okay. So it's basically an involuntary labor. So you feel forced to work. Otherwise, that employer will mistreat you, call immigration, do something just outside of the norm because they understand that you're undocumented and they're taking advantage of that.
Okay.
So we have a lot of labor trafficking type cases at Egan Immigration. And we've been winning a lot, which I'm so glad because it's been helping a lot of our clients get status.
So the visa gives them what status?
So you get a visa for 4 years, and then at the closer to that 4-year mark, you're able to apply for residency. So it does turn into lawful permanent resident status as long as your background is good. There's very how do I say it? Like waivers for certain actions that or immigration violations that you might have done in the past. So just because you have a history of maybe immigration violations, which means like entering and exit the United States unlawfully, or maybe a past deportation order, there are special waivers, even for criminal convictions. That might be a little bit more serious. There are waivers that they give in these T visas, and they're especially careful because they're victims, so it's more easily given to T visa applicants. And then when you get that waiver, you're able to get the T visa, and then after 4 years, if you're all good in 4 years, nothing else happens. Yeah, you can apply for residency.
Well, that's very good. Well, it does look like we do have our first caller. We have Doug on the line. Doug, thank you for listening, and how can we help you tonight?
I just got a quick question.
Sure.
I'm an immigrant from Canada. Been in Florida for almost 30 years.
Wow.
And I obviously have a permanent residency card. My question is, I'm probably about a week or two past the due date of renewing my permanent residency card. Legally, we're allowed to cross the border back and forth for 6 months at a time without a permanent residency card. My question is there any way to expedite my permanent residency card at the moment, again, because I'm behind the due date? In other words, it was July 21st when I was supposed to renew it by then, but because of all the immigration stuff going on and blah, 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 they've changed everything. It's a little confusing. I got to a certain point on the computer with it and kind of gave up. So I guess the question is, how do I expedite getting my permanent residency card so that I can go back to Canada to pick my mom up?
I think that's a very good question, Doug. And I'm glad Michelle's here to answer because I would say I don't know because we do personal injury, but Michelle is here, and so I'm going to lateral the question right over to Ms. Perez.
Okay, thank you. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
Not at all. I think it was very helpful.
Great.
Sure.
Thanks.
No worries. Okay, so that's a really good question. We have a lot of requests for expedite because you have to travel. So when you submit, so you haven't submitted your residency application yet, correct?
I haven't.
You haven't.
Yeah. I mean, I started to fill it all out, and I got to a certain point, and again, just, for whatever reasons, we had to stop. Financially, I guess, was or is the best, thing to say. That's why we had to stop. At the time, I didn't have the funds to put towards renewing.
Gotcha.
If you will.
Okay, so there is, we can talk about the filing fees. The filing fees, there is a potential waiver that you can apply for if you show that you can't financially pay for that waiver or for the filing fees. So there's a waiver that you can use to attach to that I-90 renewal application for your green card. But when you submit that renewal application, you will get a receipt notice, and you can actually, when you show up for your biometrics, which are your fingerprint appointments, you can bring your passport with you, and they will stamp your passport with a I-5551 stamp.
Okay.
Which is your proof of status, so you can enter and exit Canada at any point. So
back in the day, it's every 10 years that I have to renew it,
right?
And for everybody, for that matter. But again, 10 years ago, it was a matter of them punching a card with like a hole puncher, if you will,
right,
and indicating the certain month that it was valid until I got my new card. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, now they do it a little bit more electronically, thankfully.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm just asking, I guess the biggest thing is they just don't want to go through a whole bunch of crap at the border, if you will, for not having it, I guess.
Right. I wouldn't travel with an expired. I would definitely file. I suggest you file it. And then you get that stamp on your passport, the I-551 stamp, and that is your proof to enter and exit, and you're allowed to travel with that.
One more quick question. Does one have to still go to Tampa? Like 10 years ago, I had to go to the immigration office in Tampa and present my old card, and they came out an hour later or whatever and gave me a new one. Or to my understanding, can it all be done online now with this new application process and without going to the immigration office?
It's all done online when you file the application. Once they require your biometrics, your fingerprints, that's when you have to go into the office in Tampa. And that's the best thing to do, because then they could physically stamp your passport at that point so that you can enter and exit the United States safely.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Great, Doug. Thank you. I'm glad. I'm very glad Michelle was here to answer that question. All right.
Thanks. I listen to you guys all the time. I think you're awesome. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. Y'all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That does free up a line. So if you have a question, give us a call at 727-441-3000. But we are about to take our first break. So that gives you an opportunity to do it. But this is Matthew Noyes, and I am a personal injury, workers' comp, social security, disability attorney at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes. And I have Michelle Perez here as well, who is an immigration attorney. So we're all here to tackle any questions you have. If it's not in one of those areas, I'll probably pawn it over to Michelle, but we'll both together try to tackle it. So give us a call. We'll be right back from this break.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
In 1955, the law firm now known as Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes made a decision. Instead of taking whatever cases came through their doors, they decided to focus specifically on personal injury. 64 years later, the law firm is one of Clearwater's longest-running personal injury firms. Available 24 hours a day with offices in Clearwater and throughout Tampa Bay, they're ready to put decades of experience to work for you if you or a loved one has been injured in a car accident or injured due to someone's negligence or recklessness. If you feel overwhelmed, uncertain, or unsure about your next steps after being involved in an accident or after a loved one sustained serious injuries due to someone else's negligence, call Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes at 727-796-8282 or online at usalaw.com. That's 727-796-8282 or online at usalaw.com. Non-attorney spokesman.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
We are back. This is attorney Matthew Noyes, and I'm a partner at the law firm of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes. And we are here at FLA Law on the radio. We're here to answer questions that you have regarding the law. I'm not alone. Fortunately, I have my friend and colleague, Michelle Perez, here as well. Michelle is an immigration attorney. She's stationed out of Palm Harbor, but she can help anybody throughout the country and actually throughout the world.
Yes.
And so, Michelle, again, thank you for coming tonight. I know I tore you away from your husband and 3 daughters.
That's okay. Nice little break.
But we appreciate it. But if you have any questions, give us a call at 441-3000. Michelle, before we took the break, we were talking to Doug, and he was talking about, traveling with an expired visa is what I think he was saying. What's the risk of traveling without the proper documentation? Is there a risk?
Yeah, it's a huge risk. So he has his permanent resident card, and so that's what expired.
Okay.
And it expires every 10 years. There are those older folks that have those resident cards that never expire. Cough, cough. My dad has a very old resident card that
your dad's not old.
No, not at all. That doesn't have an expiration date, and so he can freely travel if all was good with his resident card because it doesn't expire. But for those, I think it was initiated in the 90s. You had to renew every 10 years. So if your resident card is expired, it doesn't mean you're not a resident anymore. It just means you need to update your system or you need to update your card. Just like if your driver's your driver's license expired, does that mean you can't drive anymore?
That's what it means.
There you go. Personal injury. That's why.
Without getting a ticket for driving with a suspended
expired license. Exactly.
Right.
But you're still a qualified driver, right? You have the, the skills to drive on the road. So as a lawful permanent resident, you're still a lawful permanent resident, but your card is expired. And if you want to travel outside the United States, you need to make sure that it's not, that it's renewed and that there's no close expiration date.
What about those people that are in the process of getting a green card? What's risk do they take of traveling in and out of the country? Is there?
Yeah. So for those who are pending residency, they can apply for a special travel permit. We call it advanced parole. And they can apply for that advanced parole document and travel. If they are granted, they can travel outside and inside the United States. At Egan, we always tell our clients it is risky even to travel with the travel permit approved by USCIS or DHS government because you're at the mercy of that officer when you return. So they can deny, if they wish, they could deny your reentry, even though you have a lawful reentry permit. And the reason is they can hold something regarding your history against you and say, I'm going to deny you entry. Have we had that happen in our firm in the past? No, but I've heard it happen to outside attorneys for their clients. And it's just because of the officer that is dealing with
that
their
person
client
at that time.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
It's variable.
Yeah. very subjective.
Yes.
You know, wow. So if people had questions regarding immigration, I know you work with Egan Immigration. Can you tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you and tell a little, and I know we talked about Egan Immigration, but how can they get in touch with you and or Egan Immigration?
Yeah. So they can call our offices, 202-709-6439. We also are on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I think that's it.
The joy of having young lawyers that can get on all those social medias. I see Michelle on TikTok right there, and it's like, oh my goodness, I don't even know how to get there. So
right, exactly.
So I know Jacqueline Bryant, my partner, is always trying to tell us to get onto TikTok, but we are kind of old school, so it's kind of hard to get us old men to get onto TikTok. But good. I'm glad that they can get in touch with the firm and get in touch with you all through those ways as well, right?
Right.
Good deal. Well, we were talking about the different types of visas before we took our break, and we talked about the VAWA, and we talked about others, but there's one that's also the Special Immigrant Juvenile Status Visa.
Yes.
I don't know what the abbreviate.
SIGIS.
SIGIS. Okay.
Or people call it SIG.
SIG. Okay. Yeah. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about the eligibility for that visa, and how does somebody go about qualifying for that?
Yeah. So those are specially reserved for juveniles that come into the country unaccompanied, which means without a parent. And so they cross the border, or they present themselves at the border requesting the assistance of the U.S. government. And they are paroled into the country, essentially. They're placed into custody, which could be with the government. A special, I don't know, I know the abbreviation's ORR, I just don't know what it means. Okay. Office of Refugee Resettlement, I think it is. So they take care of the children. And if you have family member like aunt, uncle, cousin, close family friends, they'll try to reach out to those people and place you with them.
So if they're in the country, if a family member's in the country, they'll try to place the child with a family member while he goes through this visa process? Right.
So you have to be active in this visa process. It's not something that's automatically given to you. You have to go to your state court, your family court, and request a custody order from your state court, specifically for the fact that one of your parents abandoned, neglected, or abused you in your home country, and that's why you came into the United States to seek refuge. So you have to get that custody order first in order to apply for the Special Immigrant Juvenile Visa with USCIS, which is the immigration. So it's a long process, and for these type of visas, you really need an attorney involved.
Sounds like you need two. You need
an
immigration attorney who works well with the family law attorney as well.
Yeah, okay. and that's what we do. We keep tabs on the family attorney and making sure that the custody order is submitted, and it is properly submitted, because there's certain language that needs to be in there for immigration to accept that as a custody order for them. And you have to be under a certain age. So if you age out and you don't get that custody order, you can't apply for SIGIS.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So there's a lot of details. That only an immigration immigration attorney would know.
Yeah.
And then you work with the family law attorney to try to get the necessary custody order.
Right.
So they're able to get this SIGIS visa.
Yeah.
What does that provide for them?
So it provides a special visa, and you have a visa for a certain amount of years. Depending on what country you come from, you can either immediately apply for residency, or you would have to wait a certain amount of years until they say, okay, we have enough visas to give out to this country, Mexico, or Honduras, or Guatemala. Those are the big ones that have a little bit of a delay because of the amount of kids that are coming from those countries unaccompanied, without a parent, and are being neglected, abused, or mistreated. from one of their parents. And so it just depends on what country you're from. So if you get that CIGIS visa, likely you're in immigration court as well, because if you come in unaccompanied, you're placed into removal proceedings, which is immigration court. And we need to, after we get that CIGIS visa approved, we need to go to court and we need to terminate and close down your case.
Oh, okay.
So it's a big process.
Wow.
You really need an attorney. Nobody should be doing CIGIS on their own.
Wow. And it also allows them to, once they have the visa, it allows them to work lawfully in the United States too, right?
Yeah. So with the CIGIS, what they're giving these applicants is after a certain amount of time, they'll give them a work permit. And so then they could work in the United States lawfully.
Okay. And that kind of talks about a green card. I know last time you were here, I learned that a green card really isn't green
anymore. Nope.
But it used to be. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. What is the difference between a conditional green card and a permanent green card?
That's a good question. A lot of people have that question specifically. A conditional green card is given to a spouse that marries a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident spouse, and they've been married for less than 2 years. So it's a way for immigration to keep tabs on that marriage to see if that marriage was entered validly. Out of love. And not for immigration benefit.
Okay.
There's a lot of false, fake, fraudulent, applications that are being submitted to immigration. So this was
based on marriage. Okay. Yeah,
a fake marriage. People get paid to enter into fake marriages and submit these applications, and they're not in fact married, or they didn't get married for purposes of love.
Right.
They got married for purposes of immigration.
Right.
So this is a way for immigration to keep tabs on those residents to make sure that that marriage was valid, bona fide. And once you're closer to that 2-year mark, then you have to apply for your permanent resident status, your 10-year green card. And you have to prove, once again, that the last 2 years were a bona fide marriage. We have a lot of our clients that have since been divorced during those 2 years, separated, maybe abused and neglected, or mistreated by their spouse. And so with those situations, you have to apply for a special waiver because essentially both parties need to sign that petition to change your conditional status to permanent.
As to the validity of the marriage.
Right.
Okay.
So both partners have to sign. And if you don't get one signature because you're no longer with that spouse, you're divorced, you're separated, or you're being mistreated, you have to sign for a special waiver. And that's where they look more intensely into those 2 years. And you have to provide documents and affidavits and declarations and just proof that that marriage was valid and that you tried to continue that marriage and something broke that marriage.
But just because it didn't last 2 years doesn't automatically mean that the person's being deported.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
But it takes a lawyer to understand what needs to be done in order to have that waiver.
Right.
To move that forward towards a permanent resident.
Right.
Okay, good. Very interesting. And it's good for 10 years. Once you get a permanent green card, it's good for 10 years. Mm-hmm. If it was because of marriage and the marriage isn't
older than 2 years.
Oh, how about over 5 years, let's say? It made it past the 2 years, but it didn't make it past the 10-year permanency. That doesn't matter?
Yeah, that's okay. If you've been married for 5 years and then you apply for residency status, you'll get your 10-year green card. And you won't have to prove any sort of, after you get the green card. During that green card process, you have to prove that's valid. Your marriage is valid. But after that, there is no requirement to continuously proving that your marriage is valid.
All right. And why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about the renewal of the green card? It's not automatic after 10 years.
No.
What can happen that can make somebody not qualify for the renewal of the green card?
So usually what happens is they look into your last 10 years. And it's usually a criminal-related circumstance.
Okay.
So criminally, something happened in your history which makes you deportable from the United States. We've actually had clients that have renewed their I-90, or I've heard of clients that have renewed their permanent resident card, having a history and have no problems. But that doesn't mean they're in the clear, because if they try to apply for citizenship, that's when the immigration will catch them on deportability reasons and then try to deport them.
Okay.
But for the normal circumstance, you reapply after 10 years. If everything's good, you're fine. You get, your 10-year green card.
How long is the process from application for a green card to the issuance of a green card?
I think that, don't quote me on it, I think that process might be taking a year to a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
So during that time, the applicant needs to worry about whether or not he gets the green card.
Yeah. Essentially, they can get proof of status. We talked to Doug earlier, and he needs to go get the stamp on his passport, the I-551 stamp. And that's proof just in case, maybe police stops you and you're a little worried about your expired LPR card, or you're traveling abroad. You definitely need the stamp on your passport. But yeah, you should have proof with you that you're a resident.
Okay. And so we've talked about all kinds of different visas, but I think there's one more visa that we can talk about. And I think that's the U visa.
U visa.
They have all these initial visas.
Don't ask me what the U.
I don't know what the U. I even tried to cheat. I tried to look it up to see what
Did
the
you?
U stood for. I couldn't find it. But why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what a U visa is, and when do they come into play?
I think the U visa is the only one that I don't know the acronym to U.
Okay.
T is trafficking, obviously, but U, I don't know what U stands for and why they picked the letter U. But U visa means you're a victim of a criminal activity. So it has to be a qualifying crime that was committed upon you or a family member. It depends on the circumstance. So you can either be a direct victim, like you were physically harmed, or maybe indirect victim. You viewed something that happened, and as a result, you have been psychologically harmed by that event. And then the second step is you have to show that you assisted in some way, giving your information to the police, maybe even testifying in court. If you did that, kind of stuff. Most of our clients just gave information to the police, and that was enough for them to continue with the U visa process.
Okay.
But you have to get certification from the police department or the prosecutor's office that you were actually a victim of a crime and that you participated or assisted in some form or fashion.
Now, is this in their home country?
No, in here.
Okay,
Sorry.
they're here. Okay.
Yeah, if you were a victim of a criminal activity here in the United States, the United States almost feels guilty for the fact that you were a victim in their country.
Okay, and so that's what they U. Okay.
Yeah, so then they provide you a U visa. Same with T visa. If you're trafficked in the United States, that's when they provide you that T visa.
Okay.
So it's almost like the United States helping out those undocumented because they were victims in our country, and this is a form of trying to help them gain some sort of legal status.
So the visa is really a way that if you're undocumented, and you're part of violence or a part of a criminal activity, you're not part of it,
right,
but you're a victim of criminal activity, or a child, this is a way to become documented.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That makes sense. And I can imagine, especially in the news, there's all kinds of, you're staying quite busy.
I am.
The immigration
we are very busy.
and undocumented residents and documented residents are in the news, but you stay really busy.
Yes, we do. There's a lot of cases. We have a lot of cases.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm going to put words in your mouth, but you do it because they need a voice as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we're the voice of the injured. You're the voice of the immigrant, quite honestly.
Yeah, I always love that slogan that you had, the voice of the injured.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah.
We're I consider ourselves like the voice of the victims because we I don't want to say specialize, but we focus.
Yeah, you can't say that. The Florida bar doesn't let us say specialized.
I didn't say it.
That's right. We focus on.
We focus on the victims. So U visa, your victims, T visa, your victims, VAWA, your victims. So we really started on, focusing on the victims, the undocumented victims in the country. And so I love that about Egan Immigration because that's always been our main focus is to help the victims.
That's really good. That's really good. And of some of the victims that you may have heard I know you have, but our listeners may have heard are dreamers, and we hear the word dreamers, and people that don't do immigration law may not fully understand what a dreamer is. But I think my limited knowledge of what a dreamer is that they're a victim as well.
They are
in a certain degree. So why don't you let the listeners know, what a dreamer is and what they're battling for, and what's their present status.
Right. So dreamers are DACA applicants. Deferred Action Childhood Arrivals is what it stands for. And so these are children that they're adults now, but they were brought in as children before, I believe, 2006. And they've completed high school here and they just don't have status. So President Obama at the time started the Dreamers Act, DACA. And so applicants were able to, if they met the eligibility requirements of being here before 2006, and graduating from high school and having good moral character, they were able to apply for a special deferred action, which is just a status. It's not any sort of permanency to it. It's a temporary status. You're just deferred from deportation for a certain amount of years, and you have to renew constantly. Right now, there's a battle about renewing DACA and initial DACA applicants. And there's a big fight in Congress about being able to give these DACA applicants, these dreamers, the ability to become residents. Right now, there's no form of continuing of them being able to be residents just through DACA. They would have to maybe marry a U.S. citizen or some other form of avenue that goes down to residency.
Okay,
Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, we are wrapping up our 1 hour, believe it or not. Michelle,
crazy.
Thank you very much for spending the hour with me. Before we go, though, why don't you tell our listeners and those on TikTok right there how they can get in touch with you if they have questions regarding immigration law?
Yeah. So if you have questions regarding immigration law, especially on TikTok, we are on daily to answer your immigration questions. We do them in Spanish. Today was in English, but we're usually on Spanish. So you can check us on live, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, or you can call for a consultation, 202-709-6439. And we're actually offering free evaluations starting next week.
Oh, wonderful.
So if you want to call in Monday, 202-709-6439, we'll be able to provide that free service.
And that's Michelle Perez with Egan Immigration. And I'm Matthew Noyes at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril, and Noyes. Thank you very much for listening to us this hour. We'll be back next week for another live call-in show. We'll have a probate attorney on next week, Tony Damanakis. But in the meantime, drive safely and watch out for those who don't. Take care now. Good night.
Good night.